Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here at Broadcasting Scotland. I'm afraid that all our MPs, MSPs and politicians and usual contributors are busy the night before Burns Night off being politicians elsewhere, so I'm afraid you are stuck with me, but we have a very packed programme filled with many of the news headlines that have caught our attention for tonight. And we start, as we always do, with the Ukrainian update on day 335 of the illegal Russian attempted invasion of Ukraine. In the news today, Germany could give approval to Poland for Warsaw to send their Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine as soon as Wednesday, according to Bloomberg, after Poland submitted a formal application today. Germany has said it will respond with necessary urgency. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg is confident the alliance will find a solution soon, he said, after meeting Germany's defence minister. At this pivotal moment, he said, in the war we must provide heavier and more advanced systems to Ukraine, and we must do it faster, Stoltenberg emphasised. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Biden administration is leaning towards sending Abrams tanks to the Ukraine. The paper says Berlin would agree to send a smaller number of its own Leopard 2 tanks and would also approve the delivery of more German-made tanks by Poland and other nations in return to that gesture from the United States. And in the Ukraine, 15 senior officials have left their posts on Saturday, 6 of whom have had corruption allegations levelled at them by journalists and Ukraine's anti-corruption authorities. The deputy head of Ukraine's presidential office, Kyrylo Tymoshenko, had asked President Volodymyr Zelensky to relieve him of his duties as part of the wave of government resignations and dismissals. Deputy Defence Minister Vyacheslav Shapovalov, responsible for supplying troops with food and equipment, also resigned following accusations of corruption. Deputy Prosecutor General Alexei Simonenko has been removed from his post, and 2 deputy ministers resigned from Ukraine's Ministry of Communities and Territories Development. 5 regional governors are also being removed from power. Ukraine has enough coal and gas reserves for the remaining months of winter, despite repeated Russian attacks on its energy system, and that's according to Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. Finland's Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto has signalled a possible pause in discussions with Turkey over Finnish ambitions to join NATO alongside Sweden, which he says is due to the pressure of Turkey's forthcoming election. The European Union's Foreign Policy Chief, Josep Borrell, outlined the European Union's new military aid package to Ukraine worth €500 million after the bloc's 27 foreign ministers met in Brussels on Monday. And Russia's ambassador to Estonia, Vladimir Lipayev, has accused the West of arming the Baltic state with weapons that could strike at St. Petersburg. Russian forces continue to endure operational deadlock and heavy casualties, however, according to the UK Ministry of Defence. And Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said Moscow was willing to negotiate with Ukraine in the early months of the war, but the United States and other Western nations advised Kyiv against it. Germany began Monday to move its Patriot air defence systems into Polish territory close to the Ukrainian border, where they will be deployed to prevent stray missile strikes. Andrei Medvedev, a former commander of Russia's Wagner mercenary group who recently fled to Norway, has been apprehended by police, according to his Norwegian lawyer, Brynjulf Reisnes. And back at home, news today that Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, has refused to appear before the Holyrood Constitution Committee. In a letter to the convener of the Scottish Parliament's Constitution, Europe, External Affairs and Culture Committee, Jack refused the request to give evidence before them following his decision to use a Section 35 order to overturn the Gender Recognition Reform Act, which was passed by the Scottish Parliament at the end of last year. In his letter, Mr Jack says that he does not believe it would be appropriate to attend the committee because he thinks that his decision to overturn the GRR bill will end up in court. Commenting on the latest snub of a Holyrood committee by a UK government minister, SNP MSP Alistair Allen commented, "Well, there we have it, 3 invitations, 2 Tory ministers and 1 feeble excuse for a gutless UK government unwilling to face the Scottish Parliament after launching a full frontal attack on devolution. The Tories lack the courage," he claimed, "to explain their undemocratic decisions to a Parliament they seem intent in wrecking. The level of contempt they are showing to the people of Scotland is disgraceful." And further news with regards to the United Kingdom in particular was that the Deputy First Minister has condemned the UK strikes bill. Deputy First Minister John Swimmy has set out the Scottish Government's strong opposition to the United Kingdom Government strikes minimum service levels bill. He did so in a letter to UK Enterprise Markets and Small Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake, MP. Mr Swinney says the bill will further undermine and weaken the rights of workers and directly impact on devolved areas. Mr Swinney said that the Scottish Government strongly opposes any bill that undermines legitimate trade union activity and does not respect the Scottish Government's fair work principles. Mr Swinney added that at a time when the UK Government's relationship with workers and trade unions is at such a low ebb, this bill pours fuel on the fire, risking more strikes and indeed other disruption. The strikes Minimum Service Levels Bill 2022-23 would allow the British Government to set minimum service requirements during strikes in certain sectors, which include health, fire and rescue, education, transport, nuclear decommissioning and border security. And talking of border security, another announcement today, a report published that the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is undermining trust between the European Union and the United Kingdom. Published by UK in a Changing Europe, this report has highlighted a range of looming deadlines in vital policy areas under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, known as the TCA, for which, if an agreement is not reached by set deadlines, numerous transition arrangements which are currently enabling a degree of interaction will come to an end. The Scottish National Party has warned that Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is continuing to undermine that trust, and despite the benefits of programmes such as Erasmus and Horizon, which have been vital for universities, and this lack of trust is hamstringing future opportunities for collaboration. From fisheries, financial services, energy, data or electric vehicles, there are a range of upcoming deadlines as part of the TCA which are due for negotiation. The SNP's Europe and EU accession spokesperson Alan Smith MP commented, "Leaving the European Union the way we did was bad enough, but the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill only serves to exacerbate further problems and block meaningful discussion towards durable solutions. Sadly, thanks to the hapless actions of successive United Kingdom governments, there is very little trust internationally that the UK will honour any future agreements. At the end of the day, though, there is no better deal than membership of the European Union. For the people of Scotland, that day cannot come soon enough as the European Union's US member." Staying in UK, news today that the UK government is considering raising the state pension age to 68. This is following reports that the British government is secretly planning to ramp up the state retirement age, and the Scottish National Party has warned that Scottish pensions are not safe under Westminster control. British government ministers are reported to have agreed to raise the pension age to 68 by the early 2030s, bringing forward the schedule change which was planned to be in 2046. Social justice spokesperson for the SNP, David Linden MP, said the move was just the latest in a long line of attacks from the Tories on the United Kingdom state pension. Mr Linden said in 2014 the people of Scotland were warned that the only way to protect their pensions was by voting no. Fast forward 9 years, the current state pension doesn't support the minimum standard of living, with the state age now set to rise to a staggering 68. Mr. Linden called the change scandalous, saying that it must be condemned in the strongest possible way. He commented further, "Be in no doubt, for as long as Scotland remains under Westminster control, our pensions will continue to be under threat." And also, the news continues to pile itself on with regards to the current crisis financially for the poorest, as the poorest households in the United Kingdom have almost £40 a month less cash than they did a year ago, while the richest have gained a similar sum in the same period, according to figures exposing how inflation has hit the poorest hardest. The wealthiest 20% of households had £36 a month more in discretionary income in December compared with a year before, as they enjoyed record earnings growth, which offset rising energy and food bills, analysts at Retail Economics found. The differing fortunes recorded on its cost of living tracker reflects a higher rate of inflation of 16.5% for those at the bottom end of the income scale, who spend 2/3 of their income on essentials such as food and energy, compared with 13.3% for those at the top, who spend just under half. The figures are the latest to reveal the uneven impact in the rising cost of living, as less well-off households spend a bigger proportion of their income on essentials such as food and energy bills, which have seen high inflation. Inflation on the most basic of those needs can be higher than the average, with consumers relying on supermarkets' budget ranges bearing the brunt of food price inflation in the run-up to Christmas. Overall food price inflation averaged 13.3% in December, according to the British Retail Consortium's latest figures. People struggling to afford to pay for electricity and gas can be forced onto prepayment meters, which are more costly than regular contracts, where the customer pays monthly or by direct debit. And further bad news today for anybody who thought that Brexit was a good idea, is Eurostar trains have apparently been forced to run with empty seats, and this is due to post-Brexit passport bureaucracy. Peak time Eurostar trains are daily forced to run across the channel, apparently with hundreds of empty seats, because border police cannot process passports quick enough. About 350 out of 900 seats are normally left unsold in the first services between London, Paris and Brussels, despite huge demand for the greenest form of international travel, according to Eurostar bosses. UK passports have to be stamped separately, even for travellers who can go through electronic gates since Brexit. Passengers are now told to arrive up to an hour and a half before some departures, but bottlenecks at stations still mean that they cannot all be processed in time. According to Gwendolen Cazenave, the chief executive of Eurostar, she said the COVID pandemic, when international travel was largely ruled out, had reduced drastically the number of border police staff in Paris, Nord and St Pancras, and with Brexit rules in force, you have to stamp UK passports. Cazenave, who has run the group since October 2022, added that even although she has a work permit and they know who she is, they still ask her the purpose of her visit to the UK, which takes almost 30% more time than before Brexit. She said tackling capacity issues at stations was her main priority, with Eurostar only able to offer about 70% of pre-COVID and Brexit seats across the channel. Only 250 seats can be filled leaving Amsterdam because the lack of space at the station for border controls, yet London to the Dutch capital is one of the busiest air routes in Europe. Cazenave said the demand for travel in the UK was huge, with leisure fully back and about 80 to 85% of business travellers compared with 2019. However, they are unable to offer enough seats because of station bottleneck. The chief commercial officer, Francois Ladoze, said while early morning trains were generally most affected, to avoid delays escalating, seats were limited in services throughout the day. He said, "We have become expert in capping trains, fine-tuning the number of seats available. The queues and capacity constraints are likely to be further exacerbated when the European Union's entry-exit system for foreign travellers, including UK nationals, is introduced. It has now been postponed until at least the end of 2023. Casanev said the postponement was welcome, but it remained a huge concern. Further news today with regards to Brexit is the huge increase in UK construction costs since the reality of Brexit. And this is the cost of materials and labour for construction, which have increased more steeply in the United Kingdom than in the European Union since the Brexit referendum. My apologies. I keep wanting to call it breakfast. New research has found analysis of data from the European member states, the central EU database Eurostat, and the British Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy show that between 2015 and 2022, the cost of construction materials, including cement, timber and steel, increased by a staggering 60%. At the same time, the cost of labour in the United Kingdom went up by 30%. In the European Union, where similar pressures, including supply chain and COVID problems applied, the cost of materials went up 35%, while labour in countries such as Denmark and the Netherlands went up by just over 14%. The UK Trade and Business Commission, the UK TBC, an independent body of experts set up to track the impact of Brexit, said the research would deepen growing concerns over labour shortages in the United Kingdom. Damaris Kaufman, the director of the Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction at University College London, said COVID and the energy crisis had also driven up costs. On balance, I would agree that COVID is the least of the three, probably a fifth all told, and that Brexit and the energy crisis are probably about 2/5 each, about 40% each, she said. Last week, a think tank estimated Brexit had led to a shortfall of 330,000 in the UK labour force, mostly in the low-skilled sectors. The UK TBC has now launched a nationwide consultation to gather evidence on the biggest challenges faced by Brexit. Small businesses exporting to the European Union, we know and have heard anecdotally, have been particularly hard hit. And whilst we're part of that recovery coming out both from the COVID pandemic and indeed a removal from the European Union, UK business activity has dropped at its fastest pace in 2 years. Business activity contracted at its fastest pace in 2 years in December as the high cost of living restricted household spending and companies cut investment, raising the prospect of a UK-wide recession. The services sector, which accounts for about 3/4 of private sector output, faced the biggest squeeze since the second COVID-19 lockdown. According to a closely watched survey, a slump in manufacturing output dating back to at least August continued in December. Illustrating the effects of high energy prices, rising interest rates and falling consumer demand, business reported a sustained downturn in new orders that meant they were churning through backlogs of old orders to maintain staffing levels. The S&P Global KIPS Flash Purchasing Managers Index, which includes 80% of the survey's responses from the services and manufactures sectors, dropped below the level expected by Citi economists to 47.8 from 49 in December. A reading below 50 indicates activity contracted. And the chief business economist at S&P Global Market Intelligence, Chris Williamson, said that industrial disputes, staff shortages, export losses, the rising cost of living and higher interest rates all meant the rate of economic decline gathered pace again at the start of the year. The United Kingdom is expected by many economists to suffer a recession in the first half of 2023 before a modest recovery later in the year. And in international news, we heard today details of Donald Trump's alleged election interference in Georgia, which could be released in a final report from a Georgia grand jury investigating then President Donald Trump's efforts to overturn his defeat in the state's 2020 election could soon be publicly released, depending on the outcome of a court hearing this very day. The special grand jury's findings remain sealed, and it is unclear whether Trump who launched another presidential campaign in November last year, or anyone else, will face criminal charges for election interference, conspiracy, or indeed other crimes. The panel was convened last year at the request of the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, who will ultimately decide whether to make Trump the first former US president to face criminal charges. During his final weeks in the White House, Trump called Georgia State Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, asking him to find more votes to overturn the Republicans' loss to Democrat Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Days later, a mob of Trump supporters stormed the US Capitol in an unsuccessful attempt to reverse Biden's victory. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney, who formally dissolved the grand jury last week with its report complete, has asked Willis' office to consider whether to follow the jurors' recommendations that their findings be released. Trump's lawyers will not be present at the hearing. In a statement on Monday, his Georgia-based legal team said the grand jury never subpoenaed Trump or asked him to appear voluntarily. A coalition of media organisations, including news networks and major newspapers, filed a brief on Monday arguing that the report should be published in part due to the extraordinary public interest in its contents. The special grand jury had subpoena power to gather evidence and compel witness testimony, but did not have the authority to issue indictments. If Willis determines that the charges are warranted based on the findings, she could seek indictments from a regular grand jury. The Georgia investigation is among several civil and criminal probes threatening Trump, his family, and his associates. Special counsel is overseeing US Justice Department investigations into Trump's actions to alter the outcome of the 2020 election and his retention of classified materials after he left the White House in 2021. Trump's real estate business, the Trump Organization, was convicted in a New York court in December of tax fraud. The state's Democratic Attorney General, Letitia James, has sued Trump, his company, and his children, accusing them of lying to banks and insurers about the value of their assets. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is pursuing its own criminal investigation into Trump's business. And whilst we're here, MSPs are voting on Hunting with Dogs bill. In what is a late sitting at Holyrood, the MSPs are debating a bill which aims to tighten the law on hunting with dogs in order to protect wild mammals. The Scottish Government's Hunting with Dogs bill aims to close loopholes that have allowed illegal hunting to continue, as well as prevent others from opening. The legislation will set a new 2-dog limit for all use of dogs in the course of hunting and ban the practice of trail hunting, as well as introduce a new licensing schemes to allow the use of more than 2 dogs in certain limited circumstances. These measures are intended to provide further safeguards for wild mammals, whilst also allowing land managers access to legitimate and humane control measures. Speaking ahead of the vote, Environment Minister Mary McCallum said the chasing and killing of a wild mammal with a dog for sport or otherwise has no place in modern Scotland. The bill seeks to close loopholes in the former law, as well as prevent others from opening. It does so in pursuit of the highest possible animal welfare standards, while recognising the need for farmers, land managers and environmental organisations to undertake legitimate wildlife management. Well, thank you for being with us tonight, and that is it for this evening. A full range of a large number of different things that caught our eye today. But before I go, I just want you to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So on behalf of everybody here, to those who have donated and to everyone who has signed up to make regular monthly payments, thank you very much. We have made a commitment that our programmes will always be free to view with no paywall, which would allow us to work with people, if we were able to raise the funds, to train those who could access the studio here and indeed make good all of the facilities that we can offer to people to create a Broadcasting Scotland that is well resourced and indeed a contributor to the media throughout the whole of Scotland. So if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming one of our supporters. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes and to work in those types of training programmes which I mentioned earlier. So from tonight, which doesn't feel so lonely because you've been with me, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope that the night before Burns Night that you have something planned, perhaps even to go and see something in Celtic Connections. Who knows? But thank you very much for watching.